So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second retirement webinar brought to you by Collins Residential and Edgecombe Retirement Village. So my name is Stefan Boertz, and I'll be facilitating the chat today with a really awesome panel as we discuss the topic of solving the challenges of retirement. So we're obviously really aware of how this period has impacted everyone. And the objective of the session is really to provide additional layers of insight, support, and guidance around the entire retirement process, and really hope to give you information that you may not have heard before. So, welcome and thanks to all of you for joining us. Just a couple of little things in terms of internet. So we know our internet goes up and down. So if you do lose your internet while you're busy watching, we can just ask you just to click back on the link and you'll get straight back in. And then also if panelists struggle with any connection, we're just going to shift the questions across to different members as we go. And then really encourage you, want to make this as engaging as possible. So we're really looking forward to discussions between the panel members, but also really ask that if you have any questions, please can you post them on the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen, and we'll try and get through those as we can. I don't know whose phone it is, but yeah. And then guys, just in terms of a quick little introduction to our panelists, so I asked them to raise their hands as I introduce them. Many you may already know. So Jeff Perkins, who's the developer of Edgecombe Retirement Village and heads up the residential project division within Collins Residential.
Afternoon,
and then Dave,
guys.
Afternoon, Jeff. And then Dave Cameron from Collins Residential, who's a development manager on site and also heads up all the sales at Edgecombe Retirement Village.
How's it, Steve? Morning.
So Cornell and Evan Hazen, who was part of the first retirement webinar, who's the director of TotalCare, and TotalCare managed 7 care facilities around South Africa, of which Edgecombe Retirement Village is the first within KZN. How's it, Cornell? And then Bridget Richardson, who's a registered psychological counsellor with a particular interest in adjustment, decision-making, and change management process. And I think you'll find the insights from Bridget to be really, really relevant to today's discussion as we really unpack the challenges and all the different elements that face someone moving into that phase of life. And then Dr. Seela Naidu, it's really awesome to have you on the panel. So Dr. Seela Naidu is a Kinderwood homeowner. He's also a board member of the Kinderwood Homeowners Association, and really to give us unique insights into what it is like to live within a multi-generational estate. So welcome, Seela.
Morning, Steph. Morning, everybody.
Morning. So guys, I'm just gonna kick off straight away. I'm gonna jump straight into a question with Cornell. And Cornell, basically, sort of in your experience, what have you seen to be the biggest challenges that families face when moving into the retirement phase of their life?
Thanks, Steph. It's great to be here. For us, the biggest thing is that transition from independence to dependence. And moving into a retirement estate or retirement village doesn't mean that you lose your independence, but it does to a certain extent. You can live freely in your own place and you can only use some of our services. But then over time, as you get older, your dependence becomes more on care, on security, on everything that needs to be done in that estate. So for us, that is one of the greatest challenges. You get a person with this big property and he's his own king of his castle, and he doesn't want to come and live in a smaller place and be told what he can and what he can't do. And that's a form of dependence of being in an estate, and that for us is a big challenge. We always struggle to get the men. The woman says no, they're happy to come. They love being close to everybody. They love being in a smaller place. They don't have to keep a big house clean. But the men struggle with that. So for us, that's the transition from independence to dependence. That's one of the biggest challenges.
And then Cornell, have you seen quite a few examples of that within Edgecombe Retirement Village to date?
Definitely. I think most of the people come in and say, but what is the situation here? Is this all I'm getting? And then I'm saying, no, you don't get only this. And I'm talking now assisted living, Frail-care, because that's where most of my exposure was. I mean, Dave can tell you a lot more about the houses, and I'm sure there's similar stories. But then I tell them, no, you don't get this hotel room or this Frail-care room, which is en suite and very nice and luxurious. you get this whole 5,000 square meter building. This is your new house. You've got 10 different lounges, you've got a coffee shop, you've got a restaurant, you've got a hairdresser, you've got all these facilities. So this whole place becomes the place that you see now. That's actually only where you sleep and where you watch TV and read your book. But you can do all of that outside in this whole big, nice facility that we have.
I think to add to that, Steph, as well, and Cornell, is the relationship between the residents that live in the village, the independent, and the relationship of the residents that are in the actual care centre is really a special one. So the two almost complement each other. You'll find that because the restaurant cafe is actually located in the care centre itself, the residents come up and use that, and therefore it's quite a nice sort of bond relationship. So the care centre itself is not just deemed a care centre. You actually have the opportunity to experience a whole lot of life and sort of energy from other people who are outside of the estate or the care centre using those facilities. So I think that's also a critical part.
I think just to add to that, on a Tuesday, for example, obviously out of COVID now, we've got an Irish singer that comes and we give everybody cappuccino and the whole village comes up. And that's quite nice. I mean, people interact. They see it sometimes as a nice gathering area to meet with their friends, because they can't entertain 50 people at their own house, and then have some entertainment, and they enjoy it just as much as the people in Frail-care and assisted living. So it's a nice camaraderie and different levels. We've actually, just before lockdown, I was down and there was a couple from Kinglewood, and the woman brought through 2 children for a milkshake. So I think Dr. Naidu will elaborate on that, but and he said that in the past as well. People, this multi-generational thing is really amazing that we have at Mount Edgecombe.
And then, so Bridget, so we all have our own fears, and I think a lot of people fear getting older. And I think in your experience, what are the most common fears that people have when entering the phase of retirement?
Thank you, Steph. Yeah, in my practice and obviously dealing with retirees quite a lot, we find that there's a lot of common fears amongst people going into retirement. So one of the most important ones is the fear of being alone. So that's the fear of being away from friends and family, suddenly becoming isolated or being on their own. So we need to, and things like suddenly not being busy anymore. You know, if you've led a very active lifestyle, if you've been busy with your career and your business, there's a general fear, and particularly as you mentioned, Cornell, with men, that their identities are often formed around what they do for a living, and there's very much this fear around, so now when I stop working and I move out of my home, what am I going to be doing from now? So, you know, on top of that, we have the fears around the idea of downsizing and downscaling. For some people, this is a big fear, that they're going to lose a lot of what they have and not have continuation of their current lifestyle. So what we need to do is we need to unpack some of these fears. What we know about people is anything that you worry about or that you're afraid of, you tend to either run away from it, you tend to flight, or you fight it. So when people want to talk about retirement or well-meaning family, start to bring up the topic, you fight with them, you have many reasons why you don't want to do that, or you might avoid it completely. So once again, you know, my advice is that you need to face your fears. You need to identify what are some of the things that you are worried about, and then you can start to unpack some of these things. You know, being alone means different things to many different people. For some people, they worry that because they've been working and busy all their life, they're dreading the idea of having nothing to do. But for other people, because they've been so busy, they can't wait to relax and have some quiet time. So we're dealing with 2 different people here. And I think that's what the beauty of moving into a retirement estate or a retirement village is, that it caters for all of these different needs and wants. That you have your privacy, you have your independence, but at the same time, there's no need for you to ever feel alone or lonely, because you are with like-minded people, with people who've gone through exactly the same thing. They've all moved from where they were before into a new place. So, you know, there's adjustment that has to take place, but we know it's difficult to change. So my advice is definitely to start to think around some of your fears, and then just face them and get some advice, talk to people so that you feel less scared of this new exciting phase of your life.
And I guess the big thing is that those fears are quite normal to go through.
100%. Anything that we have never experienced for any change, we automatically resist. So we fear the unknown, and that's where anxiety comes in. So it is important to realize that this is a stage of life that everybody is going to get to at some stage. And the best thing you can do is start to really put some thought around what that is going to look like to you and what you want from your retirement, and then to start, playing into that. And one of the things that we touch on is, I think it's very important, even now while people are working and at whatever stage of your life you are at, to start thinking around developing some kind of identity outside of what you do for work. A lot of people, they do certain work because they're good at certain things, but you can still take those talents and use it in ways that are not your work as such. So start developing hobbies. My advice is to always have an outside hobby like golf or tennis or bowls or walking, and then to also have 1 or 2 indoor hobbies. The reason being is sometimes the weather doesn't let you do your outside hobby, and also as a person gets older, they might not be physically able to do those outside hobbies. So definitely think about what you are looking forward to doing with your free time when you have the free time indoors. So that can be reading or playing cards or starting some woodwork or some creative craft that you can do.
And then Cornell, so just to add to that, I think that the care aspect of retirement is obviously a really big decision for families, loved ones, and the individuals themselves. At what point do people need to start planning for that?
I think the sooner the better. The ideal situation is when, as Mr. Naidu Dr. Naidu said earlier, I think when we were still off air, 70 is still young. So, I mean, depending on where you're at in your life, 60, 70 is a good stage to start planning, just to do the move, to say, I'm not necessarily going to need care, but let's move into the right environment that I don't need to move again, or my wife or my husband needs to go to a different place. And then it becomes a problem to go and visit, and it's not on your doorstep. So our indication and what we've seen over the last 20, 25 years is, if you start at 60 or 70 to do a proper planning, and that last move to be the right move, that's very important, because then you can have your last 20 or 30 years in a very nice facility and you can make friends. And then when you go and you need the care, then you're in a group with a group that understand you and that can come and visit you and that can support you outside of the care environment as well. Come and visit you while you are post-hip operation in the care center, or what the situation might be. So as soon as possible. But then you also get the other crowd that didn't make the planning, and we cater obviously for them as well. So we get people that come in at 95 or 100 years of age, and then they only come in. But then we see it is a bit of a struggle, that adaptation to come in and understand is problematic, and it can be traumatic as well.
And obviously, Cornell, I think the longer you leave that, the more difficult it becomes to actually almost accept the change. Yeah.
Yes. No, definitely. Then the transition is just very difficult. We see then it takes a month and they disorientate, they don't know. And with time, if you come up every Tuesday or every Thursday and you have a coffee, then it takes the stigma sort of out of a Frail-care, because a lot of people think of Frail-care as this dark and stinking place. And I want to challenge people to come and have a look at our facility, because that will just totally change your perceptions.
And
if they're coming in for the real coffee, I think they're really going to get a good perception of a good place.
Yeah. No, our baristas has gotten better, so our coffee is getting better by the week.
Steph, I also think, sorry to just jump in there, I also think it's important that you just highlight to anyone sort of watching is the stages of the offering. So from an option point of view, you've got the homes that are available, which are independent, and you can live independently. You've got the home-based care option. You can rent a home as well, because we've got a lot of investor buyers who have bought with the object to rent out, because they don't need to move in anytime soon. And then you obviously got the care option, where you can move into the care center and pay a monthly rental fee. So any one of those are available for anyone at any stage, which is quite a nice flexible model. Because from a sort of affordability point of view, we as a developer, have been working tirelessly with the banks and with each individual case of buyer of how they can finance their options, what's available, what we understand that investments are tied up and money's tied up, but how can we work with them to get the best case scenario. I think that's also important to highlight. It's not just this is the price, this is what it is. If you can't afford it, sorry. It's very much a flexible approach. If it's a subject to offer, if we're able to look at your investment portfolio, just to try and help buyers get into the space, because we believe it's really important.
Yeah, 100%. And then, there's a question that came through from Charles van Niekerk, and Charles, we'll get through that. It's obviously a very relevant question, but we'll get onto that. But Cornell, just quickly, another question on care. So obviously the national challenge for someone who lives within a retirement estate is how do they stay active for as long as possible to not have to go into a care facility, and how can they be cared for to their home? There's this whole revolution of active aging and the preventative care. We can keep someone as healthy and as active for as long as possible to reduce their needs for care at a later stage. How important are the facilities within an estate to the whole process of preventative care?
Yeah, I think prevention is obviously the key word here. And with a facility, we provide, for example, a village nurse service. So she goes around and and look at each individual and see, but are you guys still seeing me there?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Excuse me, sorry, something popped up here. So she goes around and makes sure that there's nothing that prevents people from going for their walks, and she makes sure that the environment that they're in is the correct environment. And that's a very important thing. If she detects there's something, the people is not feeling well, that specific person is not eating well, that's where everything starts. If you don't eat well, you can't exercise, and then you become sick. So our job is to prevent by detecting that type of thing early. And we've got a lot of guys in the States that's young, and they say, please don't visit me. I'm going to work still every day and I'm doing my thing. But for the other 50 or 70%, that's a key aspect. So we encourage them and say, go for your walks, do your exercises, eat right, and make sure that is actually happening in those facilities.
Okay. And then Jeff, from a development perspective, I think the biggest thing historically is that people have had their fingers burned in the past, buying into a retirement estate where developers have committed to facilities in the first phase, often care facilities that haven't been delivered for various different things, lack of rate of sale or lack of funds or whatever. Can you maybe just talk about the investment you guys have made into retirement, especially within Edgecombe, but also why you decided to implement the care facility in the first phase?
Thanks, Steph. Hello to everyone out there, and shout out to my mate Pete Pienaar. He got hold of me earlier, said he wants to learn all about retirement. So I said, this is absolutely the right platform. So Pete, I hope you're paying attention. But you're right, Steph, and that what you've just said doesn't just apply to the retirement space. I mean, where developers have ended up getting bad names, or when things like clubhouses get built right at the end, or don't get built at all, or halfway through the development of estates, things falter for all sorts of reasons. Could be macroeconomic or whatever. So we didn't want to be in that space. And when we decided to get involved here with Edgecombe Retirement Village, I mean, it was a big step. We were putting a toe into an area we weren't that familiar with. So we did quite a lot of homework before, and I didn't know too much about what was then sort of deemed old age homes. They were sort of places that you knew existed, but you hadn't really been in much. And we wanted to get away with that. I think Bridget will talk about the happiness curve, which I heard about for the first time off air from her. And, we want people living the dream, in these villages, and that having as much fun as humanly possible, in as much time of the day as is possible. And we wanted to ensure, well, first of all, in a retirement village, you need a care center. So it was a bold step, but we put in 115 million rand care center, and unashamedly, I think it's the best one I've come across in KZN, certainly. It's a fantastic example, and we wanted the best operators, and we looked far and wide and found Cornell and his team in TotalCare. And we also wanted the multi-generational living. I mean, it's fantastic that a granddaughter can get on his or her bicycle, ride up and see granny or grandpa in a secure environment. And we wanted to be close to a country club. Well, we bang next door to Edgecombe Country Club, where there's bowls, bridge, tennis, whatever whatever interests an individual has. So we try to bring all of that into one space where you can have as little or as much of a requirement from the care guides as needs be. And more importantly, as I said, to live the dream in the twilight years of your life. So we're very proud of Mount Edgecombe Retirement Village. It just seems to get better and better.
And then Jeff, as a developer, how far does your role extend into the projects?
Well, right until the very end. I mean, the care center's up. We've got 70 odd homes up. We've still got more to build. We've got a community center to build for the residents as well, which will complement the care center, which will have a swimming pool as well. It'll be interesting to see how much that gets used, because Cornell will tell me that in their estates that never get used, but in the other ones that they manage. But there are a lot more facilities that are going to come into MERV as it progresses into phases 2 and 3. But the nuts and bolts are already there. So we in it right to the end. And Dave will tell you, he's probably the next to Erica, the head sister. Dave is the most familiar face around Mount Edgecombe Retirement Village.
And so Dave, just understand, I think every single person who's ever stepped foot onto Mount Edgecombe Retirement Estate. What does that community look like?
So I think that nowadays, Steph, the modern day retiree strives to have, I think, a lot more purpose. So to be mentally and physically stimulated. I think shopping for retirement homes isn't what it used to be. The baby boomer generation is a lot more specific and needs in what it needs. So I think with that in mind, we aim to follow principles like active outdoor lifestyle, activities, as Cornell mentioned. Security is right up there with number 1 being, what people look for. Modern day home design and space, the option of home-based care, co-housing or multi-generation offering. We spoke about that briefly. Here, everybody from young families to retirees are all connected, and this has been a huge draw card for us. So we've almost allowed those principles or fundamentals to be the guiding force in which we have designed what we've designed. And I think that in itself builds the community that are now on board. I mean, Jeff mentioned the link to Mount Edgecombe Country Club, with 2 golf courses, with the bridge and the bowls and the club-like facilities there, our residents can make use of that. So it's all about the community, and the people come first in the retirement village. And I think, if you see what and how people are reacting now, given, the current circumstances, I've never seen a community pull like that together. I really am very proud of what we've achieved to date and what we're building. I think it's really a really good feather in our cap.
Okay, so Celine, I just want to bring you in here. So I think the beauty of this country is that it's so culturally diverse, but we also know that different cultures look at retirement in different ways. So what are your thoughts on that, and do you see it changing in future?
Thank you, Steph. You're right. Our country is diversified culturally, and each of the different cultures tend to look at the way in which they spend their retirement years a little bit differently. If we had to go back and look at, especially in terms of, to mention the Indian community, the old trend or the old culture was to live close by to the children, and you'd find that the parents will live with the children in their homes, and as the children get married, the extended family is moving, and then the young married couple has children, and they all live together in one happy home. But with modernization, westernization, also we could add in a bit of education, this trend has changed, where people now want their independence. And as a result of wanting their independence, they want their own space. If I could just dig in a little bit, you find in the old settings of the parents living with the children, children living with the parents, there was this trend of having to be told what to do, how to spend your money, where to go to, how much of money to spend, why are you spending so much of time or money on certain things by the older, rather than having to leave the young person to make decisions. And then you tend to find that, the younger person now wants to make their own decisions. And as a result of that, they want their own space. But with that being said, at the same time, we find that the older people, like I mentioned earlier on, 70 is now still regarded as young. The older people want their independence also, which basically means that they don't want to be in the face of the younger person or the younger children dictating to them as to how to live, what to do, where to place their shoes, where to place their clothes, what time to eat, what time to have their cup of coffee or tea. So they also want their space. So I think the Kindlewood estate is providing for that, where the younger generations are able to cater for the needs of the parents, parents-in-laws, of having them in the same community, but at the same time not being in their face. And this is an excellent way of having to have them close, but not too close. At the same time, maintaining the independence of the younger generation, the older generation. And it works. It works in terms of having to have your family, parents, in-laws at bird's eye view when there's a time or an event that comes up where they need you urgently, not having to travel too far away and keeping them close. So yeah, talking about culturally, different cultures look at it from different perspectives, but I know the trend is changing, especially among the Indian community, where people want their own space, want their independence, and want to live close together. Kindlewood Retirement Village in Kindlewood Estate does cater for that. And going back to what was earlier mentioned, the question was asked in terms of when should one prepare for retirement? You know, many years ago, somebody asked me, when should you take your retirement annuity? And this is something maybe all of you guys would also agree with. You take your retirement annuity the day you start your first job and you earn your first salary. This is in terms of preparation for retirement. So the younger the person is in terms of having to prepare for retirement, maybe at this point in time for their older parents or older in-laws, but also for themselves, because of the fact that we're all going to get old and we're all going to retire at some point in time. And this is what we find. Kindlewood Estate, I think, will cater for both that, having to live independently in the estate in an independent house, and then possibly having to plan ahead of having to maybe get a unit in the retirement village, or worst case scenario, if you're living in your independent house and you get to a point where you're unable to take care of yourself, you move into the care facility, which is close by, and it caters for all the needs.
And I think just to add on, it's what more do you want if you can walk up on a Sunday afternoon and go visit Granny in the care center? I mean, that's, I think, the beauty of a Kindlewood Mount Edgecombe setup, where you can have that free moving and just walking over, going to have a cup of coffee, having lunch with a loved one that's in care. So
that's true.
Yeah, and I know, Bridget, you were saying that you've also experienced a lot of that.
Yes, 100%. So I agree 100% with what Doc is saying, and very much the different cultures are, you know, we all have our own different needs. And much as people are wanting their independence, the different generations, we are definitely finding that there's a need to want to connect again back to the community and families. So as Doc was saying the other day, you know, there's a lot to be said for what grandparents can add value into families. And we're seeing nowadays that with often both parents working and the kids going to school, grandparents are playing a huge role in the lives of their grandchildren, whether it's faith, their cultures, bringing some of that back into the family. And this is what families are wanting. So as much as we're becoming more independent, I think there's definitely a pull back to wanting that community, that sense of community. And statistically, stats have shown, research has shown that the closer your friends are, the better it is for your well-being. And I don't mean as in personally close, I mean geographically, physically close. So they say that friends that live close to you, friends and family that are close to you geographically, have the most benefit to your well-being, because they're right there. You know, you can just pop around, it's easy. You know, you can call on them at any time. So there's a lot to be said for being close to your friends and your family in a geographical setting. So definitely, you know, there's a lot that retired people can offer to their families, and having your family all together in an estate is a win-win situation as far as I'm concerned. You have that benefit of knowing that they are safe, they're close by, but you don't have to see them every day, but if you want to, you can. So there's a lot to be said for having that sense of community and family, 100%.
And Seelan, do you believe it's really important for children and grandparents to live within close proximity?
100%. You know, there's if we look at our modern times, society and the fast world in which we live in, and the manner in which our children are being exposed to the new trends that are existing out there, the value system of what used to be in the old cultures and the old homes tends to be neglected to an extent, fallen away in the new generations. And I believe that the older generation, the grandparents, have a lot to offer in the nurturing and the upbringing of our younger generations. And apart from having to show them true values and teach them the rights and the wrongs, also in terms from a spiritual perspective, you know, if you look at the older generation, they're much more inclined in having to be spiritually involved. And this is one thing that I personally believe that is missing in our young society, is where the older people go to temple, go to church, spend time reading their books. But however, the younger generation are spending little time or no time having to focus on God. So bearing that in mind, that's just one concept that I believe that the older generation can cater for in terms of spending time with their younger children, teaching them the values of life, having to ensure that they're nurtured in a way to understand what life is about and the manner in which they should be living. So yes, going back to your question in terms of the older generation having to influence and spending time with the younger generation is going to have its impact. And I believe that that is what is missing in society at the moment. And time has caused the older and the younger generation to spread apart and move apart. And this is one thing that can be catered for in having to live in a common environment, a common estate, where it's a stone throw away, young children spending time with the older, and will assist in them having to be nurtured in the right direction. Society is a problem at the moment, and we're trying to fight this hell and heaven to try and change the mindset of our youngsters. And the older generation can play a pivotal role in having to assist with this.
Absolutely. So Dave, speaking of the younger generation, I know you've invested into my Edgecombe retirement village, but you don't look like a retiree just yet. But I think just the question is, why did you decide to invest into retirement as opposed to other residential options?
Yeah, sure, Steph. I think planning for any sort of longer term retirement is important, whether it's for yourself or family. But I think as a family, we made the investment because of the demand of this type of living. So, we talked long and hard as a family, because it is a family decision at the end of the day, that we wanted to diversify our property portfolio. So, I think locally there are waiting lists. So why not invest in somewhere where there's a need? Also, you can remove the stress and headaches that you'll inevitably encounter in time to come when that time happens. So I think the older you get, the more important it is to ensure that you have this type of investment. And for us, it's a fail-safe. We at the end of the day can continue as planned, like an insurance policy effectively. And then when the time comes, my folks have an opportunity to utilize something as opposed to a panic or a grudge purchase. It's in the arsenal. They've fundamentally understood the term of planning for retirement, rather than all of a sudden something happening and then they are shaken by the fact that they have to now change lifestyle completely. Whereas if you've made this investment up front, I think it's a lot softer landing. I'm sure Bridget can probably attest to that, because you do run into a lot of people who don't think about retiring. I think we're all strong and going to be living until we, late 80s, whatnot. But I think when the time comes, if something happens, if you haven't prepared or planned properly, I think you're going to be in for a huge mountain to climb in terms of stress that it puts on everybody in the family, not just the parents. I think that's important to note, because ultimately it becomes a family decision.
And Steph, I can even jump in there. Yesterday, I was having a chat with David Rolls, who's a significant property player in KZN. He's developed retail malls and a number of residential estates. And we were just chatting about how the time right now is just so perfect for investing in property as a whole. When we're talking about 50-year low interest rates, if you had money and you went and put it in the bank, you're going to get 3% at best. Yeah. With an inflation rate of 4%, you're actually going backwards. Stocks and shares at the moment are obviously a bit of a concern with the volatility and expected peaks and troughs that are going to come post, whilst everything sorts itself out on this whole COVID issue. Whereas for the first time in certainly my lifetime, properties are offering yields now in relation to what your borrowing costs are, that there aren't these big gaps. And the other thing is Dave will tell you, a rental property, when they come up at MERV, are snapped up in a heartbeat, just because there aren't a lot on offer. So where in his case they've bought for a later purpose. Right now, it's an investment, and at interest rates which are fantastic. So it's property investment just as a whole. Right now it's a very exciting time to be in that game.
Cornel, I actually just want to bring you into a question here from Charles van Niekerk, and it relates to cost, and it's always a really good question because I think it's relevant to many retirees. It just talks about if you're putting in great facilities like we have at Edgecombe Retirement Village, it obviously and to maintain those costs and the increasing annual costs related to levies, etc. How does one allow for that in light of the fact that people are living longer and could potentially outlive their savings? I know it's quite a tough question, but it's a relevant one.
I think what's important to understand with Mount Edgecombe Retirement Village is that the care center is totally separate from the village, but it gives the village a service. So what I'm trying to say by that is there's not 1 cent that comes to us or to the care center from a levy point of view. So he can rest assured that you don't have to think that now I'm going to pay double or 3 times more levy because we need to pay for this 115 million rand building and all the services that comes out of that. And a lot of the other historic retirement villages did work that way. They sort of sponsored it and say you must have X amount of meals and X amount goes to the levy to cater for the care center. So our philosophy is totally different, and that's why the size. If you have scale, then you can run it on its own without any cross subsidization from the village, and that's how we get to have a price of not as high as what we see in the market in our direct area there. Our prices are lower than our closest people or closest other facilities in the area because we've got scale and because it's a business that can stand on its own feet. So we've done some cost comparisons. A person going to rent a unit, going to pay for laundry, for cleaning, for care, which is an expensive part, your food, everything. We come at about between 30 and 40,000. And you can come and stay in a care center between 20 and 30,000, for example. And that's just because we have that scale. So that 10,000 rand saving a month is because we give you the scale.
Okay, and I think that exact exercise you spoke about of comparing what your monthly costs are for food and for rates and all that kind of stuff. I think people don't actually equate what those costs are on a month-to-month basis.
Yes. Yeah, people tend to forget you're sitting in an asset of 1 million or 5 million and no, but it's paid off. But remember, if you sell that asset and you put it in an investment or you buy, as Dave said, at the Mount Edgecombe house, you get a proper return on that. And if you take that, I mean, one good example is we got a lady from Mount Edgecombe Country Club quite recently. And she said, no, but she only has 20,000 rand a month. And then we said, but what about your 3 million rand house that you're sitting in? No, but that's in the trust. And then they realized that, look, they can invest this money better and place mom in a place where she needs to be. She needs to be in Mount Edgecombe Retirement Village in the assisted living, and the family can either rent out that house or sell it and invest elsewhere. So if you take her true cost, it's closer to 50,000 than the 20,000 that she thought she was spending.
Yeah, and I think maybe just to add to Charles' question, I think the beauty of a retirement estate within an existing estate is that you're actually not contributing towards that a lot of the infrastructure is already in place. For developers to put all the existing facilities in place would have cost them enormous amounts of money, and that's the beauty of going into an existing established estate. And also, like you say, the levies across more people brings down a lower monthly levy per person. I think that's a huge benefit of scale and going into the bigger estates.
Yeah, that's even another step up on scale, because we already have scale in Mount Edgecombe Retirement Village, but now if you add the scale of Kinglewood,
Absolutely.
then the cost per person sharing that security and everything else becomes a lot lower.
Yeah, absolutely. So Seelan, just in terms of Kindlewood, I think it's really relevant because it really is the sort of the undiscovered jewel of KZN from a state perspective. What attracted you to buy there in the first place?
Just to tell you a small story, I used to live in the neighboring town of Broadlands, rather, not really a town, more bordering on the Kindlewood Estate property. And for many years, I used to see this line of trees that bordered a road, and these are the tall conifer trees that line Kindlewood Drive. And from the property I lived in, I could stand on the balcony and look at this bank with these trees for many years. And I always said, I want to live next to those trees. So it took me a few years to eventually find a piece of land that was on the junction and actually lined those trees. And inevitably, it worked out that I was able to buy that property and build on the site that I'm living in at the moment. And I must tell you, I regard it as the best site in the estate without having to say too much.
Without being biased, hey?
Yeah. So with that being said, the estate is a medium-sized estate which provides for our needs. At one stage, having the kids having to play in the yard and always wanting to watch them, being vigilant of who's going to be jumping over the fence and having to be a security hazard to us having to be sleeping out of an estate kind of home was a problem. But having to move into the States, the security that's provided here, having to sleep with keys on the door without having to ensure that we've got burglar guards, alarm systems, is something which I think myself, together with many individuals living in the state, would attest to and would have wanted prior to moving into the estate. Now, I know that this may be also provided by many other estates. Excuse me. But with that being said, the serene environment, the greenery, the pathways, the ability to have the freedom of having to walk at any time of day or night in the estate, apart from now, unfortunately, because of COVID-19, but it's catering for all our needs. And the most pivotal part, as I keep on mentioning, is the security factor, which is important for me and every other individual that doesn't live in an estate that wants that kind of service and wants that kind of security of not having to worry about who's going to be breaking in, who's going to be stealing, or whether there's going to be some sort of issue that they're going to be exposed to. So yeah, Kindlewood has provided for my needs. I don't think I'll ever need to move out of the estate. The next plan would be having to possibly move into retirement village when I reach the point of having to not be able to take care of myself. So yeah, it's provided for our needs, and I think it's here to stay.
And then multi-generational is obviously the buzzword at the moment. I think we covered in quite a bit of detail earlier between yourself and Bridget, but how much value do you think it adds to existing Kindlewood owners to have a retirement estate incorporated within their existing boundaries?
It was an excellent decision of having to incorporate both in one estate. Like I said, I'm happy living in the state, and I would plan for my retirement of not having to move too far away. Sentiment also being shared by many other residents who also live in the estate, of having to be here. Listen, Kindlewood Estate caters for many things in terms of vicinity and locality to the shopping centers, to the local hospital, Netcare Hospital up the road, Gateway, which is not too far. It's an average of about 4 or 5 kilometers, which is traveling distance. So yeah, in terms of taking care of the old age and ensuring that retirement is well taken care of, the amalgamation between the retirement village and the estate itself was an excellent decision and well supported. This is one of the reasons I think Jeff did mention now, when spaces become available in the retirement village, they don't stand for too long. They cropped up pretty quickly because people haven't got to understand the offering of the retirement village in Kindlewood and its financial viability, together with the fact that it is also of a very good locality.
Okay. So Bridget, there's a question that's come through from Eddie Chinapin. And I'm just going to push this onto you from a psychological perspective. It says, what are the challenges of living in a retirement village? Just in your opinion, from what you've experienced.
Okay, so I think it goes back to what people are wanting from their retirement. I would say from the experience I've had, you've got to give some thought around reflecting what are you wanting from your retirement when you move into a retirement village. Are you wanting peace and privacy? Are you wanting to be active? Are you wanting to expand on what you're currently doing and do more of what interests you? And I think the challenges with a lot of people, or some of the challenges that people have faced, is not giving much thought to it and then arriving. So in other words, and often this comes from the involuntary, when retirement hasn't been voluntary. We were talking about that earlier. where people are pushed into retirement or they've been forced to go there by their children or their grandchildren, and it wasn't of their own decision. So it's taken away a lot of that autonomy. And that's why it's very important that the decision to retire is ideally made by the person that goes into the retirement village, because then it's something that they've wanted to do and their whole mindset is positive around that. But some of the challenges that I know have come up are that the community can sometimes be very close, that they don't have enough privacy. But I think if we look at the MERV setup, there's a lot of space, a lot of land, a lot of geographical openness, greenery. So very much you can be completely independent in your own home or your own unit, and have as much contact or as little contact as you choose to have. So once again, it's not the old age homes of the past where, you know, the bell rang and it was lunch and then it was dinner and you were forced to do all these activities. You can still have the same lifestyle you want. You can create that lifestyle by the way you choose to go into your retirement. You can have the contact with people, or you can choose to spend more time on your own. So I think some of the challenges have been just getting used to the change. And that's why a lot of what we've discussed today is starting to prepare yourself for what retirement means to you, and actually actively and in a positive way look forward to doing some of the things that you want to do when you are finally retired. So I hope that answers the question.
No, it does. And I think, Cornell, just from an operational perspective, what are those possible challenges that yourselves and Collins Residential worked on up front to try and alleviate?
Yeah, I think some of those challenges is how to integrate, how to get a certain type of reciprocity within the bigger village. And I think most of those challenges were quite easily overcome because, as Dr. Naidu said, it's a welcoming addition to a bigger estate. And to add on, this was basically probably the best thing that Kindlewood could have done. They could have probably just expanded and said, let's just do more houses and build more nice houses like Dr. Naidu has. But I think in essence, this created a multifaceted facility that will be highly sought after, we believe, in time. I mean, Bridget mentioned that it's not that old school, like ringing a bell and everybody goes there. Having said that, we do have a nice structure. So people know, for example, on a Wednesday, they can come to the Bike and Net Assist for a group class, or on a Friday, they can come with the occupational therapist, and on a Tuesday, there's music. So there's a lot of things that happens at a central point and that everybody's invited to. So yeah, I don't know if that...
No, that does. And then, Bridget, we all heard about the happiness curve for the first time when we were chatting earlier this week, yes. Which is obviously very relevant. Can you just maybe elaborate on that? Okay.
So the happiness curve, it's research that's been done over a long period of time. And what they found was that in your lifetime as an adult, there's what we call the happiness curve. So it has a U shape. So what they've discovered, and this is pretty much universal across all nationalities and countries that they found, we have the same sort of pattern. So generally as an adult, you start your 20s, the early 20s are very happy times. So you're probably at the peak of your happiness. Most people have found you have all your dreams, your hopes, and you're in a very happy space. You're independent, you don't have a lot of responsibility. But then gradually from your late 20s right through into your 30s, your happiness index starts to drop. So people note a general sort of decrease in happiness as you go through your 30s. And in fact, it continues to decrease all the way into your 40s. In fact, they've actually identified a specific age, 47.5, that is the rock bottom of the happiness index. So from then onwards, from your late 40s right through your 50s and all the way through to into your 80s, your happiness... Why are you all laughing?
I think Jeff's pretty much at the point of rock bottom.
Yeah, I'm rock bottom, Bridge. So I'm
on the up.
I just thought I'd laugh just to see if I can still be happy, but yes.
Definitely. What this means, so, you know, what we started off saying in the beginning is that people have a lot of fears around the idea of retirement. They almost like put the skids on, they don't want to get there, they're dreading that stage of their life. But in fact, research has shown that your retirement years and your what we call the middle to late adulthood onwards are usually one of the happiest times of your life. So with this being said, it is a time of your life where you are going to be adding new experiences to your portfolio of life experience. You're going to be doing the things that you didn't have time to do when you were working and so busy raising a family and, you know, running your businesses and earning a living. there was a lot of stress, a lot of responsibility for your well-being, your family's safety, that you can now put the focus on yourself or your partner, or if it's just yourself, and focus on what you really want to be doing with the rest of your life. And what we know is that our generation, and in fact our children's, the next generation, are going to live well into their 90s and early 100s. So this is statistically what we are looking at. So this is a very positive way to look at retirement. We're going into really good years, really good times, and the focus is going to be on what are we wanting to do with the years ahead of us. So I think it's very nice to know that this happiness curve does exist. So sorry guys that are on the down, but there's a lot of good times ahead. So to push through, and yeah, that curve will start to climb after your late 40s.
Yeah, and I guess something like lockdown, even though it's incredibly stressful, I think people are taking a lot of positives from having more time to focus on some of the stuff that's really important to them. And I guess maybe that is a bit of a glimpse into what retirement life could be like, hey?
Definitely. I think we've all had, I think we can all say we've been through, there's been ups and downs throughout this lockdown. But one thing it has made us all face is, what do we do with our time when we are not required to be in the office or be meeting with people, particularly in the first phase of lockdown. We literally could not go out, we couldn't do anything. So we definitely had to face our own fears, some of our fears around, oh my gosh, I'm going to be so bored. I know my husband was very anxious about what he was going to do with, wife and kids around. But slowly but surely, I think we all settled into a really nice space, and we started to do things that we didn't have time to do before. So whether this was playing card games, whether this was gardening, just the things around your own house and around your own personal, the things you like to do, whether it's reading or you're crafting or baking, YouTubing, whatever it might do, we start to do the things that we really want to do. And it is definitely a glimpse, and for me, it's definitely been a glimpse into what my retirement years might be like. And I must say, I'm really looking forward to having more time just to do the things that we haven't had time to do while we're raising families and sorting our businesses and our careers. Definitely.
No, absolutely. I think it's very, very relevant. So I think we're gonna start to wrap up. We always wanted to keep this around 45 minutes. And I think just to really thank everyone who's joined. I don't know if there's anything that any of the panel members want to add to the discussion.
No, I think we've covered it all.
But I think, thanks to all of you for your time today. I think thanks to all of you who've tuned in. I really hope that you've got a very different perspective on retirement and the different factors and all the rest. And what we're going to do is we send a mailer out to every single person who registered for the webinar with a short summary on some of the answers, and then obviously a recording of that. And that recording will be something you can then forward on to friends or family or loved ones who maybe not have had the opportunity to listen to today. And I think there's a huge amount of relevant stuff. And you'll also see a lot of this being posted on social media, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously just follow my Edgecombe Retirement Village on social media to get a lot of these updates as we go forward. And I'm sure we'll be calling on a lot of the panel members for ongoing content. I think it's really, really insightful stuff, and the stuff that you almost want to sort of delve in a little bit deeper in future. So I think if you've got any questions around my Edgecombe Retirement Village, I think Dave is the person to chat to. I know Dave's email address is david@hcollins.co.za, so feel free to pop him a mail if you've got any questions or want to know any more. And I know we're going to play just a very, very short little slideshow. It's not a video, it's just a slideshow of some of the key elements in terms of how the integration happens between the retirement side and Kindlewood Estate as a whole. But before we do that, I just want to thank all of you for joining, and really hope you have a wonderful weekend, that you all stay safe, and that we all enjoy what level 3 of lockdown has to offer. So thanks again for joining, and we're just going to pull up that presentation quickly now.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
So thanks everyone, and have a great afternoon. Cheers.
Thanks,
Bye.
Steph.
Thank you.
Cheers,
Bye-bye.
Right.